Hi everyone. This week, researchers from across the world have come together for AAIC, the Alzheimer's Association International Conference. And we're here to give you some of the highlights. My name is Dr. Francesca Farina and I work at the University of Chicago. And I'm joined by three amazing guests today. I'm so excited. We are joined by Dr. Annalise Rahman-Filipiak from the University of Michigan. We are joined by Dr. Merci, also from the University of Michigan, and Dr. Watermeyer from Northumbria University and the University of Edinburgh. So let's begin with each of you just giving a couple minutes about, who you are, what your work is. And we'll start with that. Let's start with Merci.
All right. My name is Merci, as you just mentioned. I study tau, that protein that everybody's been talking about that abnormally accumulates in the brain. And I really explore the mechanisms of how brain cells die. And I'm really focusing on Alzheimer's disease, progressive supranuclear palsy, and fronto-temporal dementia.
Sure. I'm Annalise Rahman-Filipiak. I am a neuropsychologist and assistant professor at the University of Michigan, as you said, go blue. I also have the great joy of being our co-lead for our Outreach, Recruitment, and Engagement Core for the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So my interests are really in aspects of recruitment science, a topic we're talking about a lot at AAIC. How do we diversify our samples? But my own lab focuses on how we go about communicating research-based results, things like amyloid and tau PET, to diverse audiences, so folks who are new to research, folks who are coming from underrepresented communities, that sort of thing.
Brilliant. And Tam?
I'm Tam. I'm also from a neuropsychology research background, and I've worked across various neurodegenerative conditions where there is a dementia component. More recently, my interests have turned to Down syndrome and learning disabilities, and I'm particularly interested in adapting and creating novel cognitive measures for the assessment in marginalized groups, including global majorities, and some interventional work as well.
Brilliant. So there's so much in everything that you just said, already. So lots to get into. We're on Tuesday today. We're day 2 of the conference, but the pre-conferences have been going for days and days. So before we get into the highlights of yesterday and today, the main conference, is there anything from the pre-conference that any of you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, I would say to Annalise's point, I attended the pre-conference that was run by the National Institutes of Aging. And actually the theme was examining diversity and recruitment and retention of Alzheimer's and related dementias. And I feel like it was so powerful because alongside the formal talks, there was an interactive component where we were able to engage with the speakers and learn how they were so successful in making sure their study was representative of their population. And some of the key things they highlighted, you would think about, normally, but it's just one, being present in the community, like having that face to the name, forming those meaningful relationships, and then 2, incentives, going in and bringing something to the community that they can really benefit from, and then that transparency. Once you get the results, as you're getting the results, make sure it's communicated to the populations who are you trying to serve.
Yeah. Absolutely, that kind of accountability that, the science has to...
Full circle.
Yeah, totally.
Something that stuck out for me with one of the peers was a sex and gender peer, where there was a debate between Dr. Chi Udemomo and Dr. Jason Flatt. And it was a sort of debate about the social construct of gender and how this might be a protective factor in terms of resilience, with Dr. Udemomo arguing that point, or a risk factor with Dr. Flatt arguing that point. And it was very interesting, brought in some personal accounts, but also the evidence in relation to the literature. And there was a little bit of karaoke afterwards as well, which you don't get quite often. So definitely watch it on demand. If it was recorded, actually.
Yeah, it had to be, right?
But
I think so. So this was part of PIA Day.
Yes.
And there's how many PIAs now? There's like a lot of them at this stage.
Yeah.
I got a chance to take part in the Partnering with Research Participants PIA, which is a really excellent one, and it very on theme with some of the things that you've discussed. What I found really powerful about it is that they had a fantastic kind of immersive activity for all the researchers, where they essentially gave out consent forms that were in kind of like shields to make them difficult to read. They also gave us earbuds and things, so that it was a bit harder to hear. And they were just talking about how a participant might navigate an informed consent process for a really complex study when they weren't able to really engage fully in that process, and how we might overcome it as researchers. And I think that kind of activity is always really humbling and grounding for us, and a great way to kick off a conference like this, where sometimes we're thinking about that high-level science and not necessarily the patient or participant experience. So, really powerful.
Totally. I just joined that PIA on the committee this year, so I'm really excited to learn more about kind of the activities they're doing and put the patients more in the center of the conference. And I know that they're also running a new event, a public-facing event this year as part of the conference on Thursday.
Yes.
Which is the first time that they're doing this.
Yeah, it's the AAIC for All event, that one. Yeah, it's just really powerful. So they're essentially, it's translating some of the, again, high-level findings from AAIC so that they are in lay language, understandable to a community, really engaging community members, inviting them to come here to Philly, but also streaming it. Wow. And so I know at our center, we've talked about having watch parties where we invite our community advisory boards or participants and then have a panel to help discuss afterwards. But I mean, that's in itself a really great commitment to making this kind of theoretical idea of inviting participants to the table much more real. So I love that.
Yeah. Amazing. So let's get into the actual conference. We should do that. So it's been 2 days, and the format of this is we're just going to go around and have a chat about what stood out to us, and mention a couple of the sessions that have happened so far, and then we'll get into maybe what you're looking forward to for the rest of the week, and if you have any upcoming presentations, or if you already presented, you can tell us a little bit about that too. So what has stood out for you? I mean, there's been so much, right? Like they're long days, but full of information. So anyone want to jump in?
I started off with the lightning rounds, they start at 8 a.m. and I was committed. So on a Monday, I'm always committed. And I went to, I forget the exact lightning round presentation, but it was by Dr. Stina Saunders, who works part in academia and part in industry. And her team conducted a survey between the US and the UK on priorities for brain health. And applied natural language processing to the free text data. And what was really interesting is that there were different priorities between the two groups. And then also the American sample sort of had more variability and came up with more ideas. So I don't know what that says about the British. But I just thought this was really interesting, and I wonder if that were applied in low to middle income countries or non-Western countries, if we would find something even more interesting and different priorities. So it just sort of made me think about some of the research that I'm doing in Africa, and wondering if we could do something similar as well, build research from those priorities as opposed to come and decide what priorities we should be implementing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a session earlier today as well, essentially stating that point, that, don't go in with your research plan fixed, and, just about meeting people where they're at and being open to changing your whole approach if that's what's necessary and if that's what your community is feeding back to you. And it's that sense of not just asking people, how can we get you interested in this? So just tell us what we need to do and we'll do it, rather than trying to guesswork or sitting in a room, with just the academic group trying to figure it out without asking anybody.
Yeah, one of the terms that I heard was participant-led research.
Yeah.
And I'm really allowing them that seat at the table. For me, I was going to highlight the featured research sessions. So I was able to attend one Sunday, and it was all about one of the new tau biomarkers. And my graduate advisor, Dr. George Bloom, was actually one of the panelists. And he was just highlighting some of the work that has been done to validate and verify that phospho-tau T217 is in fact a biomarker that we can start to integrate as a way to just diagnose early. What they're seeing is that there's increased levels of this phosphorylation event about 20 years before someone presents any cognitive decline. So now we're at a stage where we do have hopeful ways to do that early diagnosis, and hopefully next year we'll be talking about early interventions of what we can start treating people with once we confirm that they're showing these different biomarker differences.
That's awesome. I had a chance to attend a featured research symposium yesterday on sort of digital neuropsych testing, digital biomarkers, that sort of thing. I was very excited because my current postdoc had a chance to present some of his own work there. But what I thought was really powerful about that session was, hopefully Tam will agree with me here, but as neuropsychologists, occasionally, I think we can get quite stuck in our ways. We sometimes still use tests that have been around for a long time, for good reason. No names. But I do think it was really powerful to see how technology is being leveraged to make assessment kind of more nimble, more accessible. So there were a couple of talks in there using EMA, so ecological momentary assessment, to assess things like subjective memory function, but also to measure different aspects of cognition. And there was a really powerful discussion afterwards about how we can gather process scores from even traditional neuropsych tests with these new technologies, and that these process scores could potentially be just more powerful, more sensitive to early and subtle changes that we see, in early stages of the disease. So I thought it was a really nice representation of kind of a new era of neuropsychology.
Yeah. Since that, I've been having conversations with other neuropsychologists and sort of like also talking about how, we have these stereotypes of the digital aspect of these applications, of old adults don't use them or don't want to use them or don't know how to use them, or people with learning disabilities, and it's completely, actually in our own line of work, we find that that's actually completely redundant. Like they're so invested, of course there's issues with digital poverty, but I think those stereotypes of digital not being acceptable or feasible in these groups is actually starting to slowly, diminish. But I also went along to the multi-dimensional approach, which I always like to do because that gives me hope that I'm doing something right as I age. And something that really stood out for me, I thought there was a fantastically well-designed study by, and forgive me if I misspell his name, but Narlin Boa Sorte Silva. He ran this really interesting strength training RCT with also an active control condition. Always like to see an active control condition, and found that this led to reductions in white matter pathology in both the temporal and parietal lobes in people with vascular cognitive impairment. And I think that's really important because we typically want to see this as like a preventative aspect in healthy people, but they were actually taking people already with cognitive impairment, and the effects were more relevant in females. So I also like to see researchers who look at those sex differences, not just at, say, baseline, but also looking for differences in interventional effects as well. So I thought it was a really, really standout project for me, at least that day.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with we need the multimodal approach. So as exciting as all the diagnostics are, it's always nice to see, the range. And I've heard the word holistic a lot, and I don't remember hearing that so much at an AAIC before. So I think I think the space really is shifting to that understanding of, it's not going to be a one size fits all, and people will likely need multiple approaches.
Yeah, I think in like the lay community, there's when things come out about particular, like a tea or a specific diet, people treat it like it's a magic bullet, and I just don't think that's the case. I think it's all the different behaviors and things that you're doing together, which ultimately will preserve your brain health for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Although I still drink green tea every day, just in case.
That reminds me of the plenary, the last one that we just had, which was about people who live healthy for a really long time, and what are the factors that feed into that, and what can we learn from that? So looking at people who are living, I think the oldest participant mentioned was 100, and she lived to 115.
Wow.
And it was amazing, and just really trying to get that cohort and try to better understand what the factors lead into. And then there were kind of issues around brain donation, and that brings up a whole other side of the conversation of, are people willing to do that? And if they're not, why not? And some of those reasons are our fault as a scientific community, why people don't want to. And so that side of things, I think, has been really fascinating to see, or why somebody may not want to get a blood biomarker or, CSF.
So you raise a really important point. So working with the learning disabilities communities, I know everyone's making so much fuss about blood biomarkers, and that's fantastic. But when I'm talking to them, a lot of them don't want to donate blood. They don't want to go sit in an imaging machine. They don't want to do a lumbar puncture. They don't want to give blood. I think we also really, and I have seen a lot more work here on more, even like more non-invasive
like
methods,
saliva,
like saliva, hair, urine, and that's really nice to see as well. well. I think those obviously still need to go through much more validation, but it's promising that we at least are designing things that can be flexible to individuals so that everyone can take part.
For sure. I did want to highlight the other plenary. I went to with Dr. Timothy Miller. So for me, you know, as a tau person, it was really exciting to see the promise of some tau lowering therapeutics, and how, you know, paired with some of the beta amyloid medications that are approved, is showing maybe that reduction of tau could also be something that we can use in parallel to really see those changes. Since there's so much complexity, as you were alluding to, with the disease, we can't just have that one target approach. So he did present some evidence of the success with that. And then I also liked how he looped back in another disease. So as we're just focusing on Alzheimer's, we're expanding to other related dementias. He did highlight some of the effective work with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and how they have a success story where they found this lowering drug in the lab, and then went all the way through phase 3 clinical trials, and it's now FDA approved since he said April of 2023. So that was really exciting and promising, of like how we're having these roadmaps of success to keep us motivated to keep that translation from the lab to bedside.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. What can we learn from other communities, other conditions? I've heard ALS, obviously. We talk as well a lot about what we've learned from the HIV community and cancer in terms of our messaging as a community, and how we communicate with the public. So I think that's something that's also been increasing, is us trying to learn from other conditions, and also realizing that, you know, dementia is not separate from, you know, cardiovascular health and all these other things. Even as we try to explain to people and to ourselves what brain health is and means, I think that's a whole other conversation that's going to need to happen with the community as we shift away from the sort of dementia focus to brain health as something that all of us have and work on. You know, you're drinking your green tea for your brain health, and probably for your mental health and for your physical health, and all of these things are connected. So that's something that I think I've seen a lot more recently, and certainly over the last couple of days. And it's like exciting, you know, and it takes you out of your box in a way, you know what I mean? Like, it's thinking, ALS. I wouldn't have thought when I was doing my PhD training that, you know, that I would learn something from a totally different field. So it's kind of exciting, and really exciting space, I think.
I would say working across neurodegenerative conditions have actually really helped me sort of broaden my focus. I worked in ALS and FTD, Parkinson's, AD, and now moving into Down syndrome. And what I'm taking with me from all those different conditions has really benefited me in trying to like find the focus of what I want to do within, you know, one of those conditions. So it's
that's what I've always said. We need to get back to the central goal, which is protecting neurons.
Yeah.
So across all diseases, if we can really work within and throughout these different barriers that we've set up for ourselves as researchers, we can really see some progression go forward, and it'll be something that will be useful across multiple diseases. I think that's really where we're going to win as a field.
I think we also have to remember that in terms of patient experience, it's very rare that we're seeing someone who has just one condition, and not just neurodegenerative, but medical conditions. So kind of what you were saying. And I you know, some of the talks that I went to, I thought did a really great job of, again, kind of thinking about how do we treat these additional conditions that add so much additional burden, not only to the patient, but to caregivers. So I went to one really powerful talk today. Give me a second. So this was Irasima Leroy from the Global Brain Health Institute. She did a really nice job of talking about the, I think it's called SenseCog. And just the development process for that, and that again being very patient and caregiver centered, and really invited all stakeholders to the table in developing, in first of all, just understanding kind of hearing and vision and the implications they have in terms of, you know, for dementia patients, they increase agitation, you know, more disorientation, more risk of fall, so all of these other associated kind of conditions or risk factors. And then looked at home environments, but also kind of skilled nursing or residential environments to figure out what environmental triggers were sort of contributing further to hearing and vision loss, or just worsening the functional outcomes in that situation. And really thought about a multimodal intervention that would train not only care partners and those living with dementia, but also staff and even directors up at these high levels. I just thought it was a really great example of taking feedback from every single level and then integrating into an intervention that would be very meaningful, I think, for a lot of patients.
You can't bring up caregivers without reminding me of our colleague, Dr. Florence Johnson. So I was able to attend her poster today. She was presenting on the disproportionate of experiences of caregivers based off of their racial background. And what she found was that caregivers from Black and Latinx backgrounds are experiencing increased declines in their mental health as they're caregiving. And then I really like the fact that she pointed towards interventions that are culturally appropriate to really make sure these groups are getting the support that they need to take the burden off of the healthcare field. And, caregivers are giving so many hours of their time that are saving the United States and other countries a lot of money. And so if we can find ways to support and uplift them as they're helping to support their care partners, that's where we're going to see another great win in the field. So that medication, that science, but also that human aspect of who is actually caring for these populations.
Yeah, and I think it's something that Dr. Carrillo said in the opening plenary about, people have to not be left behind. Right. Anybody in this community, we have to be, as exciting as it is to have these therapies and things, we have to remember that they need to be as accessible to everybody as possible. And, with Ira's work, I have to mention the Global Brain Health Institute because I did a fellowship with them. So it would be remiss if I didn't, but I think this is what we try to do at GBHI as well. It's about equity. It's about global equity. And it's reflected in the work, I think, that our faculty do. It is truly holistic, again, to use that word, and it's inclusive. And it's one of the things that I love about GBHI. So I love that you brought that up completely unprompted. Perfect.
It was great work, I think.
Yeah.
And again, it's a theme that I'm seeing running through a lot of this conference and through GBHI as well. Yeah.
More highlights. I think we have a little time. We have time.
For just Sunday or?
Anything.
I also went along to the Finger Network luncheon on Sunday, which was fantastic to see because it's nice to have those little updates, but I just want to highlight, it's great to see that Africa is now on the map of where we're going to be bringing these multi-dimensional approaches as well.
I went to at least a couple of talks. I had to miss the last few, but Crystal Glover and colleagues put together a really nice FRS this morning. Did you? Yeah. Just the very first one, which I think it was, give me a second, Stephanie Crisfonte. I'm going to mess up that name. Give me a second.
No, I think you got it.
Crisfonte from University of Miami. Yeah. Just really, again, a powerful example of someone that used mixed methods research, went out into the community to understand how Afro-Caribbean families, caregivers, older adults think about dementia, conceptualize dementia, think about care-seeking behaviors, whether it's even discussed, and really then grounded educational interventions in that. Because, again, such a great example of how we may think we know how people conceptualize dementia in our very small communities, but if it's something that's not even broached, discussed, or if there's really a very different vocabulary and language to describe symptoms, and potentially a lot of stigma around it, then it doesn't matter if we have all the biomarker tests in the world, it doesn't matter if we have all the assessments or interventions, if we're not bringing people to the table in a way that really encourages interest and trust, it doesn't really go very far. So I think it was, she had some really powerful audio quotes from her focus groups, which I think, again, is always something great for us to hear, with actual participants talking about, one really thing that has stuck in my head was, what's in it for me and what's in it for us? This question that participants kept coming back to. So when they come into a research study, how is this benefiting my community, but how is this also benefiting me? Am I going to learn feedback on how I do on your cognitive tests, even if this is a research study? Am I going to get the results of my biomarker testing? Will someone provide resources to me afterwards? I think those are steps that we don't always think about because we're so focused on kind of the practical aspects of planning our own studies. But I think we do need to be really thoughtful about giving back results in an individual level, it's my own soapbox, but also communicating things back to a community.
Yeah. And I think that also came up. That was another question in that session, right? That all the modifiable risk factors are built around individual individual risk, and that places burden on people. And so I think we need to be doing more work around community building. Did you ask that question? Who
No.
asked? Someone asked that question. I can't remember. But
It would have, if I stayed long enough, I probably would have.
Yeah. And I think it's to your point totally that, I think we can be talking more about community and at the community level, to bring people in. And another colleague of mine, also from GBHI, Dr. Mata, who's working in Ghana, also asked a question in that session around this stigma and discrimination that people continue to face, and how we just need to keep working to reduce that stigma, eradicate it.
Great point.
Well, one thing I would say I love about AAIC is that there offers opportunities for you to get outside of your comfort zone. So I attended a very heavy genomics workshop. A lot of the words I did not understand because I am a basic science researcher, so I do a lot of wet lab. But I feel like more and more you have to be able to work with or generate large data. That's like a huge thing in our field that's shifting now. So I went to the talk, kind of a little scared and nervous, but I actually found a lot of cool resources that are out there. And one key theme that kept coming up was accessibility and transparency with the data, where there are GitHub and there are plugins. There are even now it's the Alzheimer's disease sequencing project, I believe was their whole group name, where they're actually sharing that data and making it integrating it so that they're going across studies and actually making sure that you can go through those databases and find your genes targets of interest and really see how is this coming up in different large scale studies. So I'm going to start digging into that, and I even got one of the speakers' contact information just in case I run into any trouble accessing the scripts. But it was really cool to see that work is now being shared, and it's creating a new wave where now you can do secondary data analysis and write publications and manuscripts.
It's a theme that came up. So I had the chance to speak on a panel for AAIC. Not to go back in time a bit, but data sharing, and it came up. Really, the discussion was around how it can help early career folks who may not have large amounts of funding and may need pilot data in order to get that first big grant, but also for researchers that are at smaller universities, smaller institutions, or even in countries or areas where it's harder to access those resources and data. So it is a way, when we think about diversifying the pipeline into our field and diversifying the voices that sit at this table from an academic or researcher standpoint, I think that's a major argument for these, and there are so many tools available. We just need to know about them.
Yeah. Speaking on that, Sarah Baumeister presented on the Dementia Platforms UK and spoke about their sort of mentorship program, where they have dedicated staff that will mentor individuals from low to middle income countries or ECRs, either free or for a very reduced price, and they can participate in sort of datathons and everything like that. I just thought that was a fantastic initiative, and just Sarah's lovely, so I can imagine it was her idea. But that, just something that's, again, sort of wanting to get the word out about, because I think that's a huge opportunity for the field, and kind of will keep people in it, because I think those barriers do force you sometimes to want to give up if you can't get access to sort of funding for those particularly expensive data sets, but you've got a great idea and you have to rely on maybe someone with a little bit of funding or else, but it's not necessarily you going with your ideas to sort of drive the project.
They also offer on that platform educational resources, right? And she said they were free for people from LMICs?
Yes, free for LMICs, and I think heavily discounted and reduced for ECRs. I might be misquoting that. So get in touch with Sarah Baumeister if you want to find out. But it's a fantastic sort of initiative.
But no, absolutely, it's so exciting to see these data becoming available. And again, I think it goes back to that accountability piece of, kind of really walking the walk around, okay, we collect all of this and then you have to put it out there so that it's available, and it's democratized and people can access it.
Democratizing it and making it seem like less of a dark art. I think sometimes you come with the perspective of, just thinking, oh my gosh, I would never understand this, and thinking, actually, this is pretty simple. I can get on board with this. Yeah. But speaking of facing your fears, I went along to the new risk factors for dementia incidence and mortality session, just to help my health anxiety a little bit more. And it was frightening. So there was some really interesting talks. Dr. Jason Richardson presented findings on an association between prenatal pesticide exposure and AB4240, finding an association in midlife as well as lower scores on some cognitive assessments. So makes me think what my mom was eating and where she was in the 80s. And then some other really interesting data being presented on UK Biobank with regards to lung function by Dr. Louis Yang. It was a very detailed, they looked at imaging evidence, neuroimmune markers, but essentially really finding some strong evidence about how lung function is important to brain and cognitive health. So something to check out in the recordings as well, because it's very detailed. And thorough analysis.
It makes me think of, I think is it one of the newer PIAs, the health policy PIA that's recently been established, and it's kind of this thing of, you know, we need to have better policies so that, you know, people can have better access to whatever they need, whether it's prenatal or early life. You know, we're going earlier and earlier in the life course.
I think there's a new word emerging called the enviroexome. I know
they're just adding more,
more
things to that.
And it's quite fascinating actually about basically everything can influence our brain health.
The other breaking news from today wasn't it? Was around forest fires.
Yes, I saw that as well.
Yeah, and again, not very modifiable at the individual level.
Yes.
So you know.
But with climate change, it's something we need to consider for future generations, perhaps, as well for now.
Okay, so I think we're doing okay for time. I want to ask about what you all are doing at the conference. Are you presenting? Have you presented? Tell me more about that. Let's start with you, Annalise.
So as I mentioned, I had a chance to sit on the panel for AAIC, and it was my opportunity to talk a bit about the importance of diversifying our neuroimaging samples, as well as returning results as a potential tool to build that trust and do that. I had some work with my wonderful postdoc, Dr. Joshua Fox-Fuller. He's at University of Michigan. We presented some work looking at amyloid and tau pathology and NIH toolbox performance, and essentially found that tau was more strongly associated with performance across most of the fluid cognition measures on toolbox. And then I'm really excited today. We have a poster actually right now being presented that is one of our wonderful undergraduate interns from the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Center. His name's Bilal Irfan. Unfortunately, Bilal couldn't be here because he is currently volunteering in Gaza. And he did an internship with us, but during that internship, he first authored a fantastic paper on culturally sensitive dementia care for Muslim women. And just to speak about his process for that, he literally went through an entire neurological workup, essentially as if he were a patient. He noted down aspects of that might be difficult for his sister, his mother, his own loved ones. He looked in the literature and really did a deep dive into some of the neuroethics from an Islamic tenets perspective, and created just a beautiful set of guidelines that were recently published. So that poster's happening right now, but if anybody has a chance to see that, it's available online and the publication's available.
Related to that, if I could also highlight, I went to the iStart Skills workshop today about patient and participation advisory panels and how to construct one, and we had Lupe Morales, who is a member, I think I just need to say Lupe and everyone knows who I'm talking about. She gave such a powerful speech about that, about seeing it from, the person's perspective, and in particularly us as researchers really telling and getting across to the public member community and the community of interest, like our why are we doing this, and gave some really good pragmatic kind of advice around how to sort of maintain and build that trust. Essentially, don't ghost your participants, is what she was saying. And then following that, Dr. Rihanna McCardle gave a really good sort of recommendation that she's also just recently published of how to build these participatory groups, maintain their trust, and develop the community that you need to sort of build and design your research, as opposed to just act as a sort of feedback panel for the things that you're thinking about. So.
And this would be a good time to point out that a lot of the content from the conference is available after the conference.
Yes,
so
yeah.
if you do miss a poster, they are available online. So they are all available online at aaic.alts.org. And I think they're online for 30 days. Again, fact check the things that we say, but I'm pretty sure they're available for around 30 days after the conference.
I'll get you a copy of it if you can,
Which is amazing. I mean, to have that. I think there's 4,000 people registered online for the conference as well, which is crazy. Okay, so I wanted to also ask you, so we are almost out of time, but there's a lot of other extra activities that happen as part of AAIC, and we've talked a lot about the research. We've kind of touched on skills workshops and stuff. Is there anything else in the program that even is upcoming that you're excited about, or anything that stood out from the conference or the conference approach? Or
Mercy's poster.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yes.
So I was able to present through the Alzheimer's Imaging Consortium as well, a poster on my work that's actually really motivated by the Michigan Brain Bank through the Alzheimer's Disease Center that we have, where I was able to get 6 frozen PSP brain tissue. So this is progressive supranuclear palsy, a rare pure tau disease, and 15 paraffin embedded tissue where I was able to perform immunoimaging. And when I started this project, the literature on the hippocampus of this brain disease was very small. There was maybe few papers, and everybody focuses on the frontal cortex and other brain regions that are more impaired through their motor function. But I really knew that the hippocampus would be interesting based on my previous work with Alzheimer's. And what we found, there is a ton of tau pathology in the hippocampus of individuals with progressive supranuclear palsy. And so with this finding, I'm now going to interrogate these tissue a little bit more in depth to really look at the neuron structure and see if neurons that have the tau pathology have impaired neuronal structure, really looking at the axon initial segment, its length and its intensity, and that can really help inform function. So structure, function, relationship within PSP for the first time really doing an in-depth analysis. But one thing I was going to say about I'm looking forward to, and I've already participated in, is the Aware PIA, which is for the women. And so they had a breakfast, a mentoring breakfast this morning. And what I really appreciated about it is that there are people from different career stages, but everyone was so empowering. And one of the women, I forget her name, but she part of another organization where she was saying one of the key things that we need as women is to be on publications. And so through that breakfast, she invited us to this luncheon that occurred today. And through that, we're all going to be on a publication together. Yes. So I feel like the mentorship opportunities are unmatched at AAIC. And the fact that you can get real-time mentorship that leads to advancing in your career, especially as an early stage career researcher, I'm grateful to be here. Yeah.
Really should have gone to that breakfast.
Yes.
Again,
And they have
very
really good
early.
food. Really good food.
But yeah, best food in town. So go to the breakfast. You have to wake up really early, but they're definitely worth it. And that's something I love about this community is it is so inclusive. There was a young graduate student who came along to that breakfast. Shout out to Beth. And she was asking about mentorship, and it was just so lovely to see how the woman kind of just responded to put yourself out there.
Yes.
There are women who want to mentor you, and men as well. We mustn't exclude men in sort of allyship towards this. So I do love that about this community. There's not a lot of ego scientists about, and if they are, they don't thrive in this community. It's about the work, it's about the momentum, and we all realize that people need that support to be able to contribute. So
I met one of my K mentors at an Aware breakfast. I think it's just an example. People are so open. Even folks who you think are so incredibly busy and swamped and must have a schedule that is a bit of a nightmare. They all take the time. It's just incredible.
I did go to the Alzheimer's Association Fellows Breakfast. Again, very early start, but I have to say the vibe was the same. It was lovely, super accomplished people there who you'd be like, oh my God, they're way too busy, and just offering advice, taking their time, really talking to you, listening to you. It's an amazing community.
I think when you're, like I know with myself, I get like little academic crushes and I treat people in like the field like they're rock stars. And even though I know they're nice, I just find them like, oh, hi, how are you? You know, I become like a shy schoolgirl around some members. But going to those particular events, you realize, oh, they're normal. They, you know, they eat their food in a strange way too. And, you know, like it definitely does break down the pedestal that you put them on. Right.
Speaking of women, really quickly, I wanted to highlight something that I've just remembered, a poster that I went to by, give me 1 minute, it was on perimenopause and menopause, which is a space that I'm working more and more in now, developing interventions for any individual who's going through menopause, and that, you know, most people experience cognitive symptoms, brain fog, and it can become an issue when people think that symptoms they're experiencing are menopause, and so they dismiss them and they don't seek help. And these symptoms can last 10, 12, 14 years. And there's a small literature on this, but there's evidence to suggest that symptoms that are different in Black and Hispanic women compared to white women, that the symptoms are more severe, that they last longer, but of course we're just not collecting enough data, so it's sketchy.
Well, we will be. So this is the premise of one of the projects that myself and Dr. Chi Udomomo have starting up in Kenya, where we are going to be looking at the menopausal transition alongside other biomarker and psychosocial risk factors in the development of Alzheimer's disease, trying to understand not just the sex and gender differences, but also the ethnic differences. And we're hoping to create a cohort that we can use to compare against Western populations, as well as those data sets where they do have enriched Afro-Caribbean or other ethnicity participant pool as well in the diaspora.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, because it is happening.
So I want to mention Dr. Claire Lancaster, because that's who I spoke to, and her poster, it's online, but it was super. She's doing great work in the UK, and we're also starting some work in Chicago as well, on the south side of Chicago, down in Hyde Park, looking at this. But yeah, I think there's also more of a focus, you know, on these sex and gender issues, which is also great to see that kind of increasing each year. Okay. Did we talk about what you've got upcoming?
I basically just said what my poster is on. So it's very still in the early developments, but just presenting on some of the hard work that the team in Kenya have developed through our cross-cultural adaptation of our protocol, where we've been discussing with our what we call the community reviewers around our neuropsychological batteries, our biological batteries, and some of our psychosocial questions. And in fact, one really interesting thing has come out looking at the questions that we posed for reproductive behaviors and health and fertility. We have found the feedback has been where we even have to place the questions to build rapport before we ask really sensitive questions. And also what's been really promising is that we have got new questions that we didn't think about in the West. So traditional medicines that may have estrogenic effects that we are just unaware of, with going in with our Western mindset. So that's been really kind of reaffirming to me that these definitely are studies that need to be built from the community up rather than the other way around.
Yeah. I think we covered it all. We did it all. So we are at a time, but do not forget to tune in for part 2 tomorrow. For now, I just want to thank all of you, Annalise, Merci, Tam. Thank you so much. It was really interesting and really informative. I'm Francesca Farina, and you have been listening to the Dementia Researcher podcast live at AAIC in Philadelphia.
The Dementia Researcher podcast was brought to you by University College London with generous funding from the UK National Institute for Health Research, Alzheimer's Research UK, Alzheimer's Society, Alzheimer's Association, and Race Against Dementia. Please subscribe, leave us a review, and register on our website for full access to all our great resources. dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk.